Hey, Pro-Life Jen, welcome back to the Kristen Hawkins Show. This week, Joe Biden has pardoned his son Hunter, so I'll be discussing why the 12 pro-lifers who are currently in federal prison should also be pardoned, as well as breaking down the new CDC data on abortion that was literally released the night before Thanksgiving. So let's jump in right now. To kick us off, the biggest news of this week, the one you've been hearing about nonstop on TV, is that President Joe Biden has pardoned his son Hunter for every single federal crime he has ever committed in the last 10 years, including the ones we know about and the ones we don't know about. This even includes the time when he was vice president, when Joe Biden was vice president, and the entire part of his presidency as well. Wow. I'm going to read from you the White House website and how they're describing this. A full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024. So he's been committing more crimes, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions by Special Counsel David C. West and docket blah, 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 blah in the United States District Court for the District of Delaware, docket blah, blah, blah in the Central District of California. A full and unconditional pardon for any crime for a period of 11 years. Any crime. Just to recap, there's multiple times where Joe Biden said he was not going to be issuing a pardon for his son. Just leaving it there. Joe Biden is a liar. On the other hand, the Biden administration and their weaponized DOJ has imprisoned 12 pro-life activists for peacefully praying outside of abortion vendors and Planned Parenthoods because they violated an antiquated law called the FACE Act, the Freedom of Clinic Entrances Act, or something like that. The FACE Act was created in the early 1990s to end the Operation Rescue grassroots activism. And so it's which isn't even a thing anymore. It's an antiquated law, but it has been revived in the Biden-Harris administration to attack pro-lifers and, quite frankly, to use it to scare pro-lifers from being active on the streets in front of abortion facilities, praying or sidewalk counseling. Here are a few of the people. I want just you to introduce you to some of the people that the Biden-Harris administration and their DOJ has imprisoned. Meanwhile, he's given a full unconditional pardon to his son for I don't know, purchasing cocaine, using it, lying on a federal form to purchase a gun because he's obviously a felon, has committed felonies, all that stuff. Here are some of the people that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have put in federal penitentiaries. One of the penitentiaries, by the way, is in Tallahassee, which over Thanksgiving, I don't know if you saw it, there was a little story that hit the mainstream newswire that this federal penitentiary, this women's penitentiary in Tallahassee, where some of these prisoners are being held, actually failed a federal investigation because their food had animal droppings in it, that their roofs, they're using feminine products to patch the roofs of their buildings at the penitentiary, and that they were running out of food and put the prisoners on restricted diet because they didn't have enough money to feed the prisoners. It was a story, by the way, not because the pro-life leaders, pro-life activists are there. It was a story because Jocelyn Maxwell, or whatever her name is, the woman who was associated with Epstein, she's also in that prison too, and she's starving. They all care about her, even though she's a human trafficker, not the pro-life prayer warriors that are in Tallahassee federal prison. But here are some of the people in prison, thanks to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who haven't received pardons. Paulette Harlow, a 75-year-old Catholic grandmother who has been ordered to serve a 2-year prison sentence. Beverly Williams, a 33-year-old mother and wife who's serving 3 years in jail away from her 2-year-old daughter. Lauren Handy, a 30-year-old pro-lifer who was sentenced to almost 5 years in prison for peacefully protesting and believing, the insane thing that preborn children, I don't know, deserve not to be killed. Lauren, we did a lot of activism with in the past in Washington, D.C. when we were at the Supreme Court. She was there a lot with local pro-life organizations. She was part of the Students for Life outreach at Liberty. So I've known her for a number of years. John Hinshaw, a 69-year-old man with a wife, 6 children, and 3 grandchildren. Also, Herb Garrity has been serving prison sentence. Herb is a trans man that serves in the pro-life movement, was a leader of a group called Rehumanize International. When Herb was in college, Herb was Rosemary, and she was the leader of the Students for Life effort at the University of Pittsburgh. So the Biden-Harris administration actually has imprisoned a trans man who is also a pro-life activist. I know it's very confusing, but it's very sad. And I've known Herb/Rosemary for a number of years, and that person is an incredible human being. So why did these people go to jail? As I mentioned earlier, there's something called the FACE Act. This law passed thanks to wimpy Republicans in the early 1990s, and it made it a federal crime to use force, threaten force, or use your physical body to obstruct any woman from obtaining reproductive health services, which includes abortion. It also prohibits damaging or destroying an abortion vendor. Some people say it also prohibits the same for people, so people can't block or damage a pregnancy resource center. It was signed into law by President Bill Clinton in 1994, and it's still being enforced today. The issue here is that it's been increasingly obvious that the DOJ has been weaponizing. I mean, they've been weaponizing a lot of laws against Americans. Just talk to President Trump. He has a lot of strong opinions on that. But they are using this law to weaponize their pro-abortion views, to unfairly discriminate against the pro-life movement, while, of course, not really doing anything about incidents of pro-abortion terrorism or threats. For example, like we had a Jane's Revenge threat posted on the door at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, the morning that Students for Life Action was doing a political leadership training last December. Never got a call from the FBI on that one, even though they threatened to shoot up the place. So we're not only calling, and you'll see publicly, we're calling for full unconditional pardons for these 12 pro-lifers sitting in jail, as well as the other pro-lifers who are also waiting prison sentences. Not only are we calling for those pardons by President Trump, I haven't really wasted my breath asking President Biden to do anything about it, because he's only obviously cares about his son, who Hunter, who was like selling secrets and the laptop and all that stuff, which everyone said was fake, then proved to be real. Which, by the way, we also learned this week that the Wuhan clinic or lab was responsible for leaking COVID. So like all of those conspiracy theories from years ago that we were told to stop believing are now coming true, scarily. Maybe I should be worried about, I guess there's supposed to be some battle in the sky between UFOs and the U.S. military. I saw on Twitter last night. I don't know. I'm not up on all the conspiracy theories, but maybe I laughed, but maybe I should be worried. I don't know. But so not only we're calling for these pardons, but the FACE Act needs to be repealed. Absolutely. The House of Representatives should repeal the FACE Act. It's absolutely ridiculous. The 1960s sit-in with people singing hymns, not acting violent or making any violent threats, lands you in federal prison, which, by the way, we have a federal prison problem, as I obviously demonstrated of the story from Ghislaine Maxwell and her going on a calorie restricted diet, not being able to get her vegetarian meals in Tallahassee, that we obviously must have a problem with funding our prisons and food for prisoners, which we should make sure prisoners get fed. So we obviously have a problem, federal prisons. It's not been, I think, an unknown thing that they're over saturated. There's too many people in federal prisons. Why add 12 pro-lifers? Because the Biden-Harris administration wants to, and they want to stop pro-life activism. This is why Kamala Harris's presidency would have been such a major threat to the pro-life movement, because not only would she have worked hand in hand with Planned Parenthood, probably just given them an office right there at the West Wing to, enact and seep abortion policy into every little nook and cranny of the federal government. But we also knew that Kamala Harris, because of her past actions as the California Attorney General and her political prosecution, my friend David Daleiden, founder of Center for Medical Progress, we knew she was going to come after the very core of the pro-life movement, just our fundamental rights to assembly, free speech. That is how pro-abortion she is. They are so pro-abortion on the left now, on Planned Parenthood side, they don't actually even think we have the right to exist. And this is why the Biden-Harris DOJ has waged this politically motivated campaign against pro-lifers and the First Amendment rights for the past several years. So if you want to actually do something about this, besides just being mad like I am, go to studentsforlife.org/pardon and add your name to the letter that we're actually sending to President Trump and those on the Trump inside down in Mar-a-Lago to demand that one of his first actions after he is sworn into office, after he heads back from Capitol Hill to the White House on Inauguration Day, that he gives a full unconditional pardon to these pro-life activists that Joe Biden has put in prison. This is a battle we could win, and it's going to have a massive impact, not only for those 12 that are in prison, others who are awaiting their final prison sentences, but they'll also have a massive impact for the entire pro-life movement. And just a little disclaimer, I'm not Sunny at The View having to do a forced legal disclaimer, because the ladies of The View habitually lie about anyone who's Republican or conservative. But my personal disclaimer is I'm not a big fan of violating federal laws, even when we know those federal laws are unjust, especially when there is a Democratic president, because this is what happens. So I wasn't a big fan that these pro-life activists knowingly violated federal law, but I understand why they did it. Absolutely. They were there to save lives, and they know they save lives, because the days they prayed in front of the abortion facilities and, did the 1960s sit-in, obstructed people from actually physically entering the facilities. Women didn't have their abortions, and some of those women likely didn't go back. So lives were saved. But I'm not a big fan of violating federal laws, even the ones that we hate, and the ones that should be repealed. So just FYI on that. But folks definitely for federal prison sentences. And I think this is a very easy action for President Trump and his new administration that they can take to stop the weaponization of the federal government against pro-lifers. And this will have massive effects, not only for these 12, which some of them who are apparently starving in Tallahassee in very poor conditions. It's only going to impact them and their families. It's going to impact those pro-life activists. Some of them are still waiting for prison sentences. And it's also going to impact the future of the pro-life movement, sending a signal that is still, okay to be a pro-life grassroots activist, and hopefully encourage more people to get out from abortion facilities, doing the lawful things, the things that we're not asking you to break the law, praying and sidewalk counseling, which we know have massive impacts, massive long-term, sustainable, measurable impacts. All right, next. We should not be surprised that the Biden-Harris CDC did this, although it was sickening. But the day before Thanksgiving, literally the night before Thanksgiving, when everyone's traveling, going to family, I was making pumpkin pies and homemade noodles, that the CDC dropped their latest statistics on how many preborn babies have been killed in our country because of our speaking of arcane laws, our laws on abortion. It just, to be honest with you, just represents the complete grotesque lack of judgment of those in the Biden-Harris administration and their new CDC. I cannot wait for our new CDC director, who is a known pro-life doctor, by the way. So wait for those confirmation hearings. I'm even going to sign up, I think, for Fox News just so I can watch the confirmation hearings. But without a national reporting law, these CDC stats that we get about once a year, it's usually around Thanksgiving, are kind of our best source of information about abortion deaths in our country. We can't track the deaths of mothers that are caused by intentional abortion from abortion surgery or chemical abortion pills. But we can track the number of babies who are killed. And the good news is on this front, if there's ever good news when it comes to a CDC abortion reporting memo, is that abortion is down in America according to their statistics. So here's the data. The abortion rate from 2021 to 2022. Now remember, 2022, something big happened. Roe was reversed in June, end of June. So you only have like 5 months of post-Roe America in this data. But from 2021 to 2022, the abortion rate decreased 3%. From 2021 to 2022, the abortion ratio decreased 2%. Looking broader from 2013 to 2022, the total number of abortions decreased 5% and the abortion rate decreased 10%. So the trajectory, even before Roe's reversal, primarily, I would argue, because of state legislation and laws, has been going down. Women in their 20s in the CDC report accounted for more than half of abortions in 2022, 56.5%. No big surprise there, considering this is Planned Parenthood's main target audience, and which is why we do what we do at Students for Life of America. The CDC stated in the report, quote, among the 47 areas that reported data continuously during 2013 to 2022, overall decreases were observed over time in the number and rate of reported abortions. Reported abortions, that's an important word. And an increase was observed in the number, an increase was observed in the abortion ratio. In addition, from 2021 to 2022, decreases of 2 to 3% were observed across all measures. As I said, this proves that pro-life laws are saving lives, because what changed from 2013 to 2022 before Roe was reversed? A massive influx of state pro-life legislation. And actually started around 2010, where there was that Tea Party moment in Washington, D.C. That moment that was in Washington that everyone talked about actually led to a lot of state legislatures becoming more Republican, becoming more conservative. And for a past number of years, when you look at the state legislature map of our country, Republican-led legislatures vastly outnumbered Democratic-led legislators. I mean, look at the states Trump won this year. It's kind of similar. There were some interesting takeaways. So Dr. Michael New, who I previously had on Explicitly Pro-Life a couple times, he's kind of like the pro-life social scientist. He's a professor at Catholic University America. He writes for National Review. Anytime there's like a pro-life poll or reporting numbers come out, he is out within like 5 minutes with an analysis. I don't know how he does it so fast. He's amazing. So Dr. New looked at the CDC data the night before Thanksgiving and said what was very interesting to him is that there were 15 states with heartbeat abortion prevention acts that went to effect, after Roe's reversal or shortly after. So 15 states for at least 1 month before the end of 2022 had heartbeat abortion prevention acts in place, and abortions fell in all 15 of those states. Huge win. This is why pro-life laws save lives. This is why, like, the next time you're arguing with somebody who's like, I don't know, they call themselves an abortion abolitionist, and it's like, oh, it's totally evil to go to a state capitol and work to pass a piece of pro-life legislation that only ends some abortions but not all abortions. Yeah. And then they'll say those incremental laws have no effect at all. Abortions are still happening. Yeah, you need to remember this data point. In the 15 states where there were heartbeat abortion prevention acts in place for at least 1 month by the end of 2022, the abortion rate fell from 2021 to 2022 in all 15 of those states, according to the CDC report. Is it good enough? Hell no, it's not good enough. It's never going to be good enough for us until we end all abortions. But it's a start, and it means there's babies alive today, kids getting ready to walk, kids getting ready to have their, second birthday that are alive because of pro-life state laws, because of the work that we're doing at Students for Life Action. When we ask you to go to your state capitol for a lobby day, or to go out in scorching heat in the summer and door knock for a primary race of some state delegate you've never heard about, and you'll hear me saying how important it is, and you're like, why? I've never heard about. This is why this matters. Now, bad news is many states unfortunately saw an increase in abortion because of out-of-state women traveled to their states to have abortions. This is according to Dr. New. For example, in New Mexico, which is like their governor is like pinned herself as like the queen of abortion. She's actually using taxpayer funding in New Mexico to open up another late-term abortion facility. It's literally crazy. When I drove from El Paso to Las Cruces last winter, there were like billboards welcoming me to New Mexico and championing the fact that they kill babies. Okay, so New Mexico, the number of abortions from 2021 to 2022 more than doubled. Why is this? Because in 2021, the Texas heartbeat abortion law went into effect before Roe's reversal. What did New Mexico do? Put out billboards, advertising with state money into Texas, telling women to go to New Mexico to kill their baby. In Colorado, Delaware, Minnesota, Nevada, North Carolina, Washington State, abortions increased by more than 20%. North Carolina is because of Georgia and Georgia's pro-life laws. This is absolutely abysmal. And if you live in Colorado, Delaware, Minnesota, Nevada, North Carolina, Washington, New Mexico, you need to join us at Students for Life Action because we've got massive work to do. All right. Now, while we don't have the exact data on chemical abortion, because the CDC report kind of sucks, it doesn't like talk about what types of abortion, we do know chemical abortions and the rate of chemical abortions versus surgical abortions continues to move upward. This report said 56% to 57.3% of total abortions. I would say that's probably very low. The true number could be significantly higher than CDC reports because now women are getting these drugs illegally, ordering them from like people who are in their basement in New York State who are just shipping them to them, or they're getting them from like random people in Mexico that they've never talked to or had a Zoom session with and just emailed them. So the Guttmacher Institute, which was formerly associated with Planned Parenthood, it's a pro-abortion think tank, essentially. They say chemical abortions are at least 60% of all abortions in our country. I would argue it's probably more like 70. Now, the other thing you have to note from the CDC report is there were some people missing. You notice when I read their quote, they said 47 areas. They do not have data from New Hampshire, Maryland, New Jersey, and California, like the largest abortion state in the country. Those states have failed to report their abortion data. Why can they fail to report their data? Because we have no national abortion reporting law. There's actually no requirement that the state actually report their abortion data. This is why when some folks ask me, like, what's the actual abortion numbers? I'm like, well, it's a mix between what the Guttmacher Institute has, because a lot of states will report to Guttmacher, and the mix of what the CDC has. And sometimes you have to mash them up. The Guttmacher Institute and the CDC data previously had shown increase of abortion since 2017, but the CDC data that came out shows, at least in the short term, the Dobbs decision, the Roe's reversal, has halted what was previously from 2017 an upward trend, proving once again pro-life laws save lives. All right, guys, for this last segment, I've asked my Instagram followers, and yes, I do check your DMs, if folks had any questions for me. And I received a few great ones, some silly ones, but a lot of really great ones. So I wanted to spend some time on this episode specifically going through so you know that I am reading your DMs and seeing your questions. So one of the questions I got was, what is your response to the pro-choice argument that abortion prevents overpopulation? Memorize this word or phrase. The world is not overpopulated. Let's say it together. The world is not overpopulated. In fact, the population has been below replacement rate since the 1970s, which means people are not being born at a higher rate than people are dying. The myth that we are overpopulated actually originated in 1798 with Thomas Malthus, an essay on the principles of population. He predicted overpopulation would lead to food shortages by 1980 and would destroy all of humanity. Newsflash, it didn't happen. I mean, some things have destroyed humanity, I would argue, social media being one of them. But it's not, humanity has not been completely destroyed, and it has not been completely destroyed because of mass starvation. There was even like a movie in like the 70s, I think it was called Soylent Green, about them eating people because there was going to be no more food because of overpopulation. It was a big thing. We saw in the early 1900s with a lot of the eugenicists, Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, even, like my husband's favorite president, I hate to say it, Teddy Roosevelt was a eugenicist. A lot of these folks thought that there was overpopulation, there was too much immigration, certain people shouldn't be allowed to reproduce, and they used a lot of this Thomas Malthus predictions as their justification. Even like Walt Disney, there was videos, cartoons he made for the folks in Latin America using some of his famous characters in the 1960s, encouraging birth control because the world was going to be overpopulated and how is everybody's responsibility, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's not happening. Elon Musk has said over and over again, the greatest threat to our civilization is the fact that we're not reproducing ourselves. And demographers have been very clear. Countries like Japan and South Korea are so far below replacement rate that demographers are saying there is no way they will be able to reverse the trend, that eventually the last, ethnically Japanese person will be born at some date, and they've kind of figured out the date because they're so far. Once you get so far below replacement rate, there's no coming back for your population. So that is just a myth. It's just a myth and fake news. Now, the truth is, even if the world was overpopulated, just to like bite the bullet in the argument, someone yelling at you for 5 minutes about what your sources are, and you have to say like Google, science, and they don't want to believe you. The truth is, even if the world is overpopulated, that doesn't justify killing innocent human life. In the name of overpopulation, abortion has been justified for decades just because they want to refuse to acknowledge the humanity of the preborn child. Doesn't work. Fake news, move on. 2, another question I often get is, how do you explain how an ectopic pregnancy is different than abortion? Now, I think for Christmas, Santa needs to bring me some, I have like a fetal model, I have abortion tools. I think I need those like uterine models that you had in like when you were 15 at health class. They showed like the uterus before pregnancy, during, after, whatever. I think I need those because I can explain that. They have even fallopian tubes on them. But an ectopic pregnancy occurs when the newly conceived human being does not implant where he or she should implant, which is the walls of the mom's uterus. Typically, in ectopic pregnancy, the child can implant inside of the fallopian tube. So remember, right, you have the ovary, then you have the fallopian tube that goes into the uterus, right? So that once a month, an egg gets released from one of the ovaries. The egg travels down the fallopian tube. If the egg is fertilized with the sperm, human life is conceived. The egg, usually conception happens in the fallopian tube. Then the fertilized egg, that's what the abortion lobby calls it, I shouldn't say that. The new human being, the embryo, the zygote, travels to the mother's uterine lining and plants his or herself. Now, in the name of, in order to justify hormonal birth control and IVF, the powers that be, ACOG, the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, literally changed the definition of pregnancy in like 1965. So it used to be pregnancy was when sperm and egg united, unique human being is created, unique DNA code that is unreplicable, that's wholly unique. That would be pregnancy, right? Human being been created. 1965, because of hormonal birth control, and one of the actions of hormonal birth control can be the shedding of the lining of the uterus so the human can't implant. They changed the definition of pregnancy from conception to implantation, saying, well, the human being is alive here in the fallopian tube. It's traveling down the fallopian tube, but you're not really pregnant until the human being locks in on the uterine lining. So that's why when people say, hey, hormonal birth control may be abortifacient, the pill, the shot, if you're using a hormonal IUD, may be abortifacient because it's going to force the lining of the uterus to shed. So even if a new human being has been conceived, one of the actions can be it can shed the lining of the uterus so the baby cannot implant. Now, also copper IUD is abortifacient because it kills sperm. And if it doesn't kill a sperm, it spins. And the IUD, the whole point of the IUD is it spins and it keeps scraping the lining of the uterus, so no human being can implant. So whether you're using a hormonal IUD or a copper IUD, those are abortifacient, like big time. Big time. The hormonal IUD is supposed to act like birth control and prevent the eggs from being released from the ovaries, although we all know it's not foolproof because we all know someone who is conceived when their mom was on birth control. Breakthrough ovulation absolutely occurs. But that's how it happens a little. I know, sorry. This is why my husband probably doesn't watch my podcast anymore because too much, he says, too much. But anyway, so an ectopic pregnancy happens when the baby is conceived and is conceived somewhere not in the uterus. Now, with an ectopic pregnancy, they are life-threatening for a mother because if a baby is implanting into your fallopian tube, the baby cannot grow. As the baby grows, the fallopian tube will expand, the fallopian tube can burst, and you will bleed internally and die. This is why for years, even after the FDA approved chemical abortion pills, until from 2000 2021, the FDA said if you're going to take chemical abortion pills, you have to have an ultrasound performed before to make sure you're not experiencing ectopic pregnancy, because if you take chemical abortion pills, that's going to shed the lining of the uterus, induce contractions, right? It's not going to stop a child from growing in the fallopian tubes, and you could still die. That's like one of the most reckless things our FDA ever did. In the name of abortion access, they got rid of that ultrasound requirement because going to the doctor was too hard during COVID. And it's life-threatening. Like, that's what we've been like waving our hands up in the air of like, wait a minute, you're so pro-abortion, you'd rather let some women die. I mean, ectopic pregnancies happen about 2% of the population. And you're like, oh, that's not a big deal. But think about like 2% of our population is allergic to peanuts. And I can't freaking eat peanuts anymore on the plane because we care about the 2% of the population that could die if I eat peanuts on the plane. So we take great precaution there. But for these women who are experiencing ectopic pregnancy and want to have abortion, yeah, no precaution, because in the name of abortion access for everybody else, we don't care. That's literally what the FDA said. So ectopic pregnancy is deadly. Ectopic pregnancy has to be treated. There's a surgical removal option to cut part of the fallopian tube. It can make you infertile or make, stop that one ovary from releasing an egg. So you only get an egg every other month. There is a pill way, which is, that will basically end the life of the child. That will treat an ectopic pregnancy. There have been doctors, and I know a doctor actually in California, who at the request of a mother tried to surgically remove the child from the fallopian tube and implant the child in the uterus, and that hasn't worked. Those transplants haven't worked. When artificial wombs become medical technology, which they will, they're working on it. They're not working on it because they want to save babies in ectopic pregnancies, or they're working on it because gay men want to have babies and don't want to have to pay surrogates. And so they want to have a place to implant these human beings that are created into a fake womb so that they have no human interaction and are born in a laboratory. Don't get me started. But when artificial wombs are created, I think you can make a case that let's try to implant these children into an artificial womb to see if we can save their life. I don't know if it'll work. There's a famous picture, I'm going to try to Google it for you, of a baby who was in a fallopian tube. It used to be on all the pro-life literature, all the like pro-life brochures in like the 1990s. It's like a teardrop picture of a child, and you can see the child fully formed in this like teardrop kind of bubble. And I was a child who died through an ectopic pregnancy. And I'll try to find that for you and show it. Used to be on, like I said, it used to be on like every single piece of pro-life literature in America. But no, to answer the fundamental question, I know I've given you too much information, as I usually do. To answer the question, treating ectopic pregnancy is non-abortion. Why? Because an abortion is a direct, intentional ending of a human child's life. That's what abortion is. You go to the abortion facility, you pay the doctor money, and you say, I want to leave with the mother of a dead child. If the child is still alive, you have failed in your job. Treating ectopic pregnancy to save the life of the mother is not the same thing. And it is so callous that the abortion lobby intentionally tries to confuse Americans, and especially American women who've endured the pain of having ectopic pregnancy of a child who would not survive. It is absolutely heinous. Besides killing babies, this is the second most awful thing they've ever done, is trying to convince women who've had miscarriages, where their baby has died inside of them, telling those women that if you've taken, the second drug in the chemical abortion cocktail, or if you've had the DNC to remove your dead child, you've also had an abortion, which it's not the same thing. Their child has died. The child must be removed from the mother, because if not, she will, develop infection, sepsis, and die. Removing a dead child is not the same thing as going in and killing a child and then removing it. Miscarriage is not an intentional abortion. Treating ectopic pregnancy is not an intentional direct abortion. Your intent, physician's intent, matters. So don't, when you see this BS happening on social media and in the comment section, now you know the facts. Make sure to educate people. And if you can, get some, uterine diagrams out there. Well, thank you guys for joining me today for this episode of the Kristen Hawkins Show. I hope you will subscribe and follow for more discussions like this. If you can, leave like a comment or rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts. I was on it the other day, and a bunch of trolls got on it and like gave me 1 star. Like, what the heck? We got some production value over here. I give you information sourced with facts. Like, why 1 star? Even if you hate me, it just makes me mad. Also, if you want to hear from me daily, Monday through Friday on pro-life news that you need to know about. I encourage you to join my personal text list. It's obviously free. You just text the word Kristen. You have to spell my name right. Kristan. Thanks, Mom. To 53445. Text my name to 53445. You'll get a daily text from me. It's short. It's just like a news article. Here's what's going on. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. I hope you've got your Christmas cookies, planned. I have a whole baking schedule here at Hawkins' house. The tree is up. The stockings are up. All the Christmas gifts have been ordered and wrapped. It's actually a record. So I know there's a lot going on. I've got to write like 250 Christmas cards. That's the only thing left on my agenda. But I hope you are underway in celebrating the birth of our Savior and King. But hey, thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for partnering with me. Let's continue to raise our voices and stand together for life. See y'all next week.